Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a great day and that you're enjoying your time at home. Uh, we're going to keep on keeping on. Hopefully, we'll be coming out of the phase 2 process soon, and then we'll have everybody back together. But until that day, we're going to keep on working from home or, are coming back and forth. Now, today we're talking about governments, so political and economic systems. And the thing about government is that there's always been a form of government. Anytime a civilization arises, there has to be a form of government. Now, as far as democracy, which was, actually established fairly early, but in a totally different form than what we know it today, because the ancient Greek leader Cleisthenes set up the earliest form, which in Athens, Greece. And basically what it was is that all citizens belonged to the assembly, in which everyone who was a citizen was considered equal before the law. Now, the problem with this setup is that while, if you were a citizen, this is great, only 20% of Athenians were actually citizens. Non-citizens, which basically included everybody else. So it was women, foreign-born males, and slaves. They were still excluded from political life, so it still wasn't, an all-encompassing form of democracy. I mean, we have more people who participate in democracy now than ever did in ancient Greece, even though theirs was a straight democracy, meaning everybody was, if you were a citizen, you were automatically part of the assembly. So it was just a very different setup. Now, the thing is that the world today is made up of nearly 200 independent countries that vary in size, military might, natural resources, and world influence. Each country is defined by characteristics such as its territory, its population, and its sovereignty, or freedom from outside control. All of these elements are brought together under a government. And in carrying out its task, a government must make and enforce policies and laws that are binding on all people living within its territory. Now, the government of each country has unique characteristics that relate to that country's historical development. To carry out their functions, governments have been organized in a variety of ways. Most large countries have several different levels of government, and these usually include a national or central government, as well as the governments of smaller internal divisions, such as provinces, states, counties, cities, towns, and villages. Now, a unitary system of government gives all of these powers to the national or central government. This structure does not mean that only one level of government exists, though. Rather, it means that the central government creates state, provincial, and other local governments and gives them limited sovereignty. The United Kingdom and France both developed unitary governments as they gradually emerged from smaller territories during the late Middle Ages and early modern times. Now, a federal system of government divides the powers of government between the national government and the state or provincial governments. Each level of government has a sovereignty in some areas. The United States developed a federal system after the 13 colonies became independent. Another similar type of government structure is a confederation, or a loose union of independent territories. The United States at first formed a confederation, but this type of political arrangement failed to provide an effective national government. As a result, the U.S. Constitution made the national government supreme while preserving some state government powers. Today, other countries with federal or confederal systems include Canada, Switzerland, Brazil, Mexico, Australia, and India. Now, the governments of the world's countries also differ in the ways they exercise authority. So, governments can be classified by asking the question, who governs the state? Under this classification systems, all governments belong to one of three major groups. You have number one, an autocracy, which is ruled by one person. You have two, an oligarchy, which is ruled by a few people, or three, a democracy, which is ruled by many people. Now, any system of government in which the power and authority to rule belong to a single individual is called an autocracy. Autocracies are the oldest and one of the most common forms of government. Most autocrats achieve and maintain their position of authority through inheritance or by the ruthless use of military or police power. Some forms of autocracy exist. One is an absolute or totalitarian dictatorship. In a totalitarian dictatorship, the decisions of a single leader determine government policies. The government under such a system can come to power through revolution or election. The totalitarian dictator seeks to control all aspects of social and economic life. So examples that you probably are familiar with from history classes or whatever would include like Adolf Hitler's government in Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1935, Benito Mussolini's rule in Italy from 1922 to 1943, Joseph Stalin from 1924 to 1953, to even current ones like Kim Jong-un's and his father Kim Jong-il, their reign in North Korea, which is currently ongoing. In such dictatorships, the government is not responsible to the people, and the people have no power to limit their rulers' actions. So there's the key thing. The people have no freedom. Now, monarchy is another form of autocratic government, and in a monarchy, a king or queen exercises the supreme powers of government. Monarchs usually inherit their positions, and absolute monarchs have complete or unlimited power to rule their people. The king of Saudi Arabia, for example, is an absolute monarch. Now, these are pretty rare today, but from the 1400s to the 1700s, kings or queens with absolute power ruled most of Western Europe. Now, today, some countries, such as the United Kingdom, Sweden, Japan, Jordan, and Thailand, have constitutional monarchies, which these are monarchs that share government powers with elected legislatures, or they serve as ceremonial leaders, meaning that they don't necessarily make decisions. Now, an oligarchy, on the other hand, is any system of government in which a small group holds power. The group derives its power from wealth, military power, social position, or a combination of these elements. Sometimes religion is the source of power. Today, the governments of communist countries, such as China, are mostly oligarchies. In such countries, leaders in the Communist Party and the armed forces control the government. Both the dictatorships and oligarchies sometimes claim they rule for the people. Such governments may try to give the appearance of control by the people. For example, they might hold elections but offer only one candidate, or control the election results in some way. Such governments may also have some type of legislature or national assembly elected by or representing the people. These legislatures, however, only approve policies or decisions already made by the leaders. As in a dictatorship, oligarchies usually suppress all political opposition. And sometimes this is ruthlessly. Like if you oppose them, they might have you arrested and like executed. Then there's a democracy, which is any system of government in which leaders rule with the consent of the citizens. The term democracy comes from the Greek demos, which means the people, and kratia, which means rule, so rule of the people. The ancient Greeks used the word democracy to mean government by the many in contrast to government by the few. The key idea of democracy is that the people hold sovereign power. In a direct democracy in which citizens themselves decide on issues, exist in some places at local levels of government. No country today has a national government, though, based on a direct democracy. It's too unwieldy. Instead, democratic countries have representative democracies in which the people elect representatives with the responsibility and power to make laws and conduct government. An assembly of the people's representatives may be called a council, a legislature, a congress, or a parliament. Now, many democratic countries, such as the United States and France, are republics. In a republic, voters elect all major officials who are responsible to the people. The head of state or the head of government is usually a president elected for a specific term. Not every democracy is a republic. The United Kingdom, for example, is a democracy with a monarch as head of state. This monarch's role is ceremonial, and elected officials hold the power to rule. Now we're going to get into economic systems, in which governments around the world deal with many kinds of economic systems. However, most typically fall into they typically have to make three decisions generally. Number one is what and how many goods and services should be produced. Two, how should they be produced? And three, who gets the goods and services that are produced? These three major types, there are three major types of economic systems. You have traditional, market, and command. And every one of them makes these decisions differently. So in a traditional economy, habit and custom determine the rules for all economic activity. Individuals are not free to make decisions based on what they would like to have. Instead, their behavior is defined by the customs of their elders and ancestors. For example, it was a tradition in the Inuit society of northern Canada that a successful hunter would share the spoils of the hunt with other families in the village. This custom allowed the Inuit to survive the Arctic climate for thousands of years. Today, traditional economic systems exist in very limited parts of the world. You don't see these too often. Now, a market economy, on the other hand, is pretty common. This is where individuals and private groups make decisions about what to produce. People, as shoppers, choose what products they will or will not buy, and businesses make more of what they believe consumers want. A market economy is based on free enterprise, the idea that private individuals or groups have the right to own property or businesses and make a profit with only limited government interference. In a free enterprise system, people are free to choose what jobs they will do and for whom they will work. Another term for an economic system organized in this way is capitalism. Now, no country in the world, however, has a pure market economy system. Today, the U.S. economy and others like it are described as mixed economies. Now, a mixed economy is one in which the government supports and regulates free enterprise through decisions that affect the marketplace. In this arrangement, the government's main economic task is to preserve the free market by keeping competition free and fair and by supporting the public interest. Governments in modern mixed economies also influence their economies by spending tax revenues to support social services such as healthcare, education, and housing. So the U.S. actually has a mixed market economy because, the government will make some decisions, but for the most part, people get a lot of leeway in it as well. Then there's a command economy, which is where the government owns or directs the means of production, or the land, labor, capital, which is your machinery and your factories, and the business managers, and controls the distribution of goods, believing that economic decision-making benefits all of society and not just a few people. Countries with command economies try to distribute goods and services equally among all citizens. Public taxes, for example, are used to support social services such as housing and healthcare for all citizens. However, citizens have no voice in how this tax money is spent. And then there's probably the two most famous command economies. You have socialism and capitalism. So a command economy is either one of these things, depending on how much the government is involved. In theory, communism requires strict government control of almost all the entire society, including its economy. The government decides how much to produce, what to produce, and how to distribute the goods and services provided. One political party, the Communist Party, makes decisions based on, and may even use various forms of coercion to ensure that the decisions are carried out at lower political and economic levels. Supporters of the market system claim that without free business or free decision making and incentives, businesses will not innovate or produce products that people want. Customers will be limited in their choices and economies will stagnate. As a result of these problems, command economies often decline, and usually very quickly. An example is, in the former Soviet Union, where it lasted for about 50 years until their economy cratered because there was no growth. It just stagnated. Now, by 2000, Russia and the other countries that were once part of the Soviet Union were developing market economies. China and Vietnam have allowed some free enterprise to promote economic growth, although their governments tightly control political affairs. Now, an economic system called socialism allows an even wider range of free enterprise alongside government-run activities. And socialism has three main goals: the equal distribution of wealth and economic opportunity. Number two would be society's control through its government of all major decisions about production. And number three, public ownership of most land, factories, and other means of production. Politically, some socialist countries, especially those in Western Europe, are democracies. Under democratic socialism, people have basic human rights and elect their political leaders, even though the government controls certain industries. So they're kind of like this, they're more of a mixed market in a lot of respects. Like they have socialist principles, but they still have a lot of business that they interact with there. So here's just a chart of the different types and where you can find them. And same here, this kind of gives you an idea. So thank you for listening. I will see you tomorrow.